Proposed, clause 20, page 43, line 24, at end insert as printed on the marshaled list.
Sorry. In the Mirror newspaper last week, clause 20 hit the headlines. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner claimed that reforms protecting employees from third-party harassment would not chill free speech, and she rubbished claims that innocent workplace banter is the target. To quote her, "Nobody should be abused while doing their job, but we've seen a horrific rise in violent abuse and harassment of shop workers and other public-facing staff." She went on to describe those of us worried about the unintended consequences of this clause as resorting to, quote, "spreading made-up nonsense." I feel the need to counter this misinformation because I fear that Angela Rayner may herself be influenced by misinformation about what's in her own bill. I was then especially alarmed when the TUC General Secretary, Paul Nowak, told the newspaper that those of us opposing Clause 20 are, quote, "insulting people's intelligence by pretending that protecting workers from harassment is the same as banter." But actually, it is. And that's not my decision. It's present in the way the equality law has been interpreted in equality in employment tribunals, as has just been described, that associates harassment with banter. You see, whatever the government or Angela Rayner or the TUC thinks is in the bill, it does not set out, this bill, what constitutes harassment, or rather what does not. And so, at committee, we were directed by the Minister to the definitions of harassment used in equality legislation that is then interpreted in employment tribunals. It's important to note that under the Equality Act, as interpreted, harassment includes indirect harassment, and as the EHRC guidance includes the following descriptions of spoken words, jokes, written words and posts on social media, physical expressions and gestures, and yes, banter. And indeed, as we've heard, employment tribunals hear many cases relating to workplace banter, 57 in 2024. And if you look at human resources literature, it's full of advice to employers on managing banter in the workplace between their employees. One horrendous suggestion put out to employers was maybe monitor conversations and attempt to pick up or preempt any problems. Another was sending people on, wait for it, appropriate conversation training sessions. I've just been sent the details of a consultant. There's always a consultant behind all of this stuff. He's an inclusive language and banter specialist. He's running workshops at £495 a shot, and one of his first ones is, "What does the term transgender mean to you?" I won't say out loud or I might get done by the banter police, but anyway, cisgender is a phrase that I don't think we want to be put into the hands of the banter police, and this is why we're raising this. It's not to cause a fuss. It's actually that the problem is that this is in the bill. Now, I've always argued against this broad and elastic definition of harassment. I think it's problematic that it undermines free speech, but as I've made that case very, very many times in this House and actually at committee, I also want to emphasise that I think it risks trivialising genuine cases of harassment and diluting the impact of genuine anti-harassment policies that require serious attention. And I do believe that what's driven the government to introduce Clause 20 is it wants to deal with serious issues of harassment. But it hasn't drawn the conclusion that by looking at the way employment tribunals understand harassment under the Equality Act, that in fact banter is part of it. So whether the government or the Deputy Prime Minister likes it or not, Clause 20 does mean that casual remarks made by third parties are in scope as indirect harassment. So I do hope that the government will welcome with open arms the noble Lord Young's Amendment 43. That simply clarifies that Clause 20 will not apply to indirect harassment or overheard conversations, and therefore, in that instance, Angela Rayner can concentrate on the nasty abuse stuff and not have this picked up unintentionally. And employers can focus on protecting employers from harassment directly targeting them, which is very different to what's in the bill at present. And if I take the government at face value, which I am prepared to do, then that there's absolutely no intention of undermining free speech in public-facing places in this clause, that it's not about policing informal conversations of members of the public in workplaces, and that some employees could say are offensive. If I take that at face value, then please, can I say to the Minister, accept Amendment 44? Because this means that the definition of harassment will not and cannot include conversation or speech involving the expression of an opinion, political, moral, religious, or any other social matter. But while these mitigating amendments are useful, I still most strongly support Amendment 45. That is, that we leave out Clause 20 entirely. Because in addition to arguments previously argued in committee, we should note that the Law Society has now got involved. It is identified that employers must take all reasonable steps to prevent their staff from experiencing harassment by third parties. And the Law Society, not me, but the Law Society, notes that while employers will be familiar with the notion of taking reasonable steps, inclusion of the word all runs the risk of setting an unreasonably high bar for employers to meet. For example, an employer might design policies and action plans to take reasonable steps to prevent harassment of third parties, put together what appears to be a comprehensive package of measures, although I note how much energy even reading that is, never mind doing it. But nonetheless, regardless, if the employee can point to any single additional reasonable means that the employers could have taken but didn't, then the claim could be upheld, even if the employer has attempted to do all they could to comply. Talk about making workplaces jump through hoops. Clause 20 could be a recipe for spiralling lawfare. This seems to contradict one of the aims of the bill, as stated in the government's evidence and analysis paper, that is, to reduce workplace conflict, which we're told by ACAS costs $30 billion a year. But Clause 20 will mean employment tribunals will go up. They'll become a source of tension and more conflict. But for me, one of the dangers is that it sets up another conflict, a toxic relationship between public-facing workplaces and the public. Employers will be forced to treat the public as a source of potential problems, to be managed, to be shushed in case they say the wrong thing, and to encourage their employees to see customers, often their fellow workers, as the enemy. In sectors where customer relationships are crucial, like retail and hospitality, this could strain interactions between staff and patrons. Customers often appreciate friendly, personable service, which includes light-hearted conversations and jokes and banter. And if they perceive that such casual conversations are being policed, then that's going to diminish the social interaction between both sides. If employees are restricted from engaging in exchanges due to fear of violating policies, that could lead to a sterile and impersonal experiences of services, devoid of any spontaneity, and it might actually deter customers from returning. It will affect revenue and reputation, but just what a loss. Earlier today, I referred to Omar Lubak, who is also concerned about Clause 20. He works in hospitality, and he notes that actually working in hospitality really has enhanced his skills, precisely because it's encouraged his people skills. He's gained in confidence and grown into the young man that is now able to communicate so well, precisely because he was exposed to that lively public square that is precisely the place, the pub, or in any of the hospitality. But that is now seen through the prism of harassment, and that does Omar, it does the place of hospitality, and it does the customers a great disservice to only see it that way. I really believe that the government think that they are helping workers against fighting harassment with this clause. It is not doing that. It will lead to the chilling of free speech and will be a disaster for the public square. Please don't do it, Minister.
My Lord.